Alright, response video to the virtuous pornographer again, this time on economics. He conceded he's not an expert. Yeah, well, technically I'm not either, but I think I got it. Anyway, on this monetary stuff, this is how I will attempt to explain it. Regarding standards, like a gold standard. Alright, one of the fundamental flaws with a gold standard, in the idea that would be, is that, okay, say a government, whatever, it collects a bunch of some commodity, something worth money, gold, so let's say it's gold, and then it issues paper money to the value of that gold into the economy. And then people can take the money, the paper money, and give it to the government. The government will reimburse them with the gold, so that proves the value of the money. When they start with the euro, they sort of did something like that. I mean, they printed a bunch of euros and just guaranteed that if you gave us back a euro, it would be worth $1. And so that established its starting out rate. And so basically that's how it starts. All right, it's sort of in the past how most of these currencies have started. You have a gold standard. What you're really saying is it doesn't really have anything to do with gold. It has to do with how much it costs to extract gold from the ground. That's going to be a real factor in deciding what a piece of gold is going to be worth, and how much gold is going to be available in the world, which will decide the value of that gold. So that's really your standard. So you haven't really accomplished much, because gold can't go to too high a price to reflect the actual value of the productivity and the progress. And so those are the two things in an economy that grow an economy, is this productivity thing, and technologies usually, and just the general idea of progress. I mean, our lifestyles get better and easier. It gets easier to do something, or there's a more efficient way to accomplish a task, and that's a benefit we should all somehow equally reap. Through progress, we all should gain the benefits of progress. So anyway, so when it gets into the economy, that's what a dollar bill ends up being worth, is this thing, productivity and progress, the value of work being done and the value of the technological advances. And so if you tie it to some commodity, then that commodity will have to increase in price to reflect that increase in productivity. And then you end up saying, if gold went to $2,000 an ounce, well, then there's going to be a huge number of people that are going to want to rush out and try to dig gold out of the ground, because they're basically able to dig money out of the ground then. And so it can never go too high. It can never reflect the real value of the dollar. And the other downside to having a standard is once you restrict the amount of the available currency, anybody who possesses a surplus or hoards that currency can cause an acceleration in the value of the currency. And it also makes the currency hard to borrow. Everybody can make money by just hoarding the currency, because all the productivity and all the progress that the economy produces has to go into the currency. It has to always be reflected in the value of that dollar. So if it has to be reflected, then people can automatically make money, or make value, make their money increase by just hoarding it, by just putting dollar bills in a mattress or something. And they could instantaneously gain wealth by doing that. And that's what you want to kind of inhibit in an economy. That's what ultimately destroys economies, and will destroy this one, is the fact that we didn't really realize that's the game. And that's the real game here, is once you allow the possession of a surplus to gain interest, you have to extract that from somebody. You have to extract that either from the progress the civilization is making, or you have to extract the value from a worker. There's only two places to get that value. So you have to force a worker to work more hours or produce more, or you have to have a way of gleaning it out of overall general progress in the economy. So I mean, you could look back at, say, 1970, and you could say, you could look at what income could buy an average house. And what's happened in our economy is that since then, the cost of a house has probably increased tenfold, while income's only risen maybe 3 times. So the average working man has had the real value of his money has been diminished, because it cannot buy the same commodities, the same basic commodity it could before. So by that standard, by the house standard or the car standard, the average person has lost a lot of value to their dollar. They're not gaining their dollar. The dollar they possess doesn't have any of the advancement in technology and progress built into it. They've been completely, all of that value has gone into the stock market, into the price of land, or the overall price of commodities, which the rich own. And so that's the consolidation problem. So anyway, the whole idea of this fractional reserve banking ties into this, in the sense that, like I said, if you had a standard, then people couldn't borrow money, because money would be to my advantage. If I'm making 5% or 10% a year just hoarding my money because of the value being produced in the economy, then I have no incentive to lend it to anybody, because that's a risk. And so I'm going to at least lend it. If I am going to lend it, I'm going to lend it at least that value that it's going to retain. So if you don't have, if the money is or if the money is gaining value over time, which would happen on a standard, then that would be the established lowest interest rate. Every interest rate that you would borrow money at would have to be some point higher than that, what you would get by just hoarding the money. So you're talking about interest rates that, to borrow money, that would be too high for the average person to afford. So you'd have less innovation, but you'd have less competition with existing businesses. You'd have more monopolies. You'd have less capacity to borrow money. And so that wouldn't be very conducive to an economy booming, because there'd be less competition, less innovation, and less progress, less productivity in the end. So you want people to be able to borrow money, and so that's why the fractional reserve banking thing sort of works in a way, because it makes more money available for borrowing. The problem with the way our government ran the system is that it essentially gave the money away for free. I mean, it gave money to banks saying, well, here, you can lend 10 times the amount of this money we're going to give you, but the government never gets the money back. Okay, so it not only doesn't glean the profit that the banks are gleaning in interest, but it holds the liability for whatever money is lost. So whatever loans aren't paying back, the government's essentially insuring. It's taking the losses on the money, so it's giving the banks a free ride to make money on their money. And the only thing it's gained, or the only thing the economy has gained, is the fact that money has been made available for borrowing at a lower interest rate, because there's more money available for borrowing. So, I mean, it has an advantage, but its advantage is lost if there isn't some system to get the real value of the money back again, to regulate how much money goes out versus how much of the capital is ever returned first, and who gains all the profits off that money. And then the other problem with our economy is the fact that we have this $11 trillion debt, and people don't appreciate it for decades, because they just say, okay, well, the interest rates are manageable, we can keep paying interest on the debt, and every consumer loses value through that process over time, but it's cheaper, okay, than actually extracting all the money and paying the bill. But in the long run, it's a lot more expensive, because you still have to pay the principal, okay? I mean, we've just been paying the interest, and the principal's still sitting there, and it still has to be paid. And now the principal's grown to an amount that's equal to the amount of the value in the entire stock market. So it's basically what's happened is people have deferred paying their income taxes. So the highest bracket earners haven't paid their income tax, basically. And they've said, well, let's put it off to the future, and I want to invest my money in the stock market. So they've been free to gain a 10% or more gain on their money every year over time by not paying taxes, by essentially borrowing the money from the government. And the price of that is that the stock market is inflated in value, because it's basically all borrowed money. It's not, it's not money that isn't being paid. And so then you end up with this situation where you have a debt that's as big as all profit. So now the rich are basically want to extract the value of their money, this money they've gained through not paying a bill, and in doing that they're going to raise the price of all commodities, because they're going to have to start buying things that have real lasting value. And the only things that are going to be like that are things you live in or things that you eat. I mean, the consumables, the direct consumables are what they're going to start buying, and that's when inflation will really start. And the only good thing about inflation, if we finally get to it, is that it will wipe out the value of the debt. But it would be a lot more efficient just to start wiping that value out deliberately, and of course extracting the value from the people who have gained the ill-gotten gains, and there are ill-gotten.
You got to keep focused on the idea that it's interest. It's once you make surpluses, once you guarantee a profit from possession of a surplus, that's when an economy is going to fail, because you have to extract that value from somebody working.